Just imagine what you could be if that emotional weight were lifted. So think about how you would operate when you're not driven by, I have to prove myself, or I have to work from harder than everyone else, or I have to do things perfectly. Just how much more excited, inspired, creative, confident, optimistic you would be, and how all of these different things contribute to improved performance, but also just greater fulfillment.
Welcome to Drive Talks with Coaches. Hi, my name is Edwin. I'm the founder of CoachFellas. CoachFellas is an online marketplace for professional and life coaching, and our mission is to make coaching accessible for everyone. Today, I'm excited to have Amanda Leah with us. Amanda is a life coach and psychologist. After over 8 years working in corporate and startup environments across Southeast Asia, she felt stuck, anxious, restless, and constantly questioning her purpose. Day to day, there was a nagging feeling inside, leaving her in a state of languish. Through ups and downs and therapy, she finally listened to her inner voice and found the courage to step into the mental health space. Her journey has led her to explore the powerful connection between mind and body, and in her coaching practice, she applies her learnings and various techniques with her clients, including psychology and neuroscience of mental health, somatics and trauma-informed psychotherapy, breathwork and mindful yoga movement, and performance-oriented coaching. Driven by her curiosity, she now supports a wide range of clients towards self-discovery, healing, and growth. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Thank you for taking time for the interview. So, first question, can you share your journey on becoming a coach?
So my journey to becoming a coach started a few years ago. Two things happened sort of at the same time to lead me to a career pivot into the mental health and wellness space. The first key moment was realizing I felt unsettled in a career that I had thought was, or for a long time believed would be, ideal for me. At that point, I was leading growth at a startup with a great social impact narrative, which I cared a lot about. What excited me most about that role was the potential to scale our impact and help millions of people. So the scale at that point was really important. We grew really quickly, and within our first year, we grew to work with over 1 million women. And I realized as the weeks went by that while I cared about the impact and the purpose, what truly moved me was working with individuals in a very personalized, intimate way. And I guess helping millions of people from an office headquarter didn't allow me to feel that. So at that point, I looked back at my career and I realized that maybe scale didn't actually matter that much. And it was that one-on-one work that brought me the most fulfillment, even though I'd never really given myself a chance to fully explore that, especially as a full-blown career. At the same time, this is the second thing that happened. Mental health became a much closer issue to me. I had my own sort of mental health challenges, and also saw my friends and family go through their own bouts of mental health challenges, especially during COVID, right? So just this issue of mental health felt much closer in a way that it hadn't ever before. And I knew that I wanted to help people more directly with what they were going through. So at that point, I decided to pursue or allow myself to pursue a career in psychology. Coaching actually initially was kind of a stepping stone toward becoming, either a psychotherapist or a clinical psychologist. And as I went through that training and had my own experiences both as a coach and as a coachee, I saw firsthand really how powerful the coaching process is, and I loved it. And so, yeah, now I'm a certified coach, and it's become a really central part of the work that I do to help others as an integrated mind body
Mm,
therapist. Sorry. So, yeah, that's me.
great. Yeah. So very personal in terms of like getting to talk to individuals to help them in a personal way. I think that's the part where you really find meaning. I think a lot of coaches find meaning in that as well. Can you share a bit more about the mind-body connection? You talked about it quite a bit, and yeah, I just want to understand what it entails or how it helps supports clients.
Yeah, yeah. I can get real geeky about this. I'll do my best to to not to get too geeky about it, but so mind body connection refers to the relationship between our mind, so our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, our attitudes, and our physical health. So, just as an example, people that experience anxiety, which people tend to think about sort of as an exclusively like mental or emotional challenge, also are more likely or tend to have physical issues related to gut health, muscle pain,
Mm.
chronic pain, headaches, things like that. And there's a physiological explanation for this. Like people don't think they're connected, but they are, right? And it's related to your nervous system. So when you experience anxiety, it's because your body senses that it's under threat. And the anxiety itself is part of this protective nervous system response against something that your brain is interpreting as potentially dangerous in your environment. So automatically your body, your nervous system activates this sympathetic fight or flight response and prepares itself sort of for battle, right? In whatever form that might be. Your heart rate increases, your breathing speeds up, your muscles tense, your focus also narrows. So typically you get sort of this tunnel vision effect and you really zero in on what's causing you the stress. And then separately, you also tend to lose your appetite. Your digestion
Mm.
slows as your body chooses to prioritize immediate survival or addressing immediate threats. So in short bursts and in certain situations, like emergencies, physical activities, high pressure scenarios, it's an incredibly useful and important response in keeping you safe. But for a lot of people, or for people who are, frequently in this state or experience prolonged stress or prolonged anxiety, you're putting your body in this state for a long time. So your body's
Mm.
working overtime. And if you can imagine sort of, I talked about your heart beating faster, your breathing picks up, your muscles are tense, right? All of those things that are working beyond what they're designed for, right? This can lead to chronic or longer term health issues like heart disease, lung problems, chronic pain. Your now deprioritized digestive system also takes a hit, so you're more likely to experience things like bloating, indigestion, stomach issues, IBS, and anxiety are also very correlated. So just things like that. When you hear about people who are stressed, who are getting sick often, experiencing like
Mm.
muscle ache or tension, or just feeling all around like why is my body so old? This
Mm.
could be why, right? It could be that their sympathetic fight or flight response is just activated a lot more than it should be. And while this fight or flight response is an evolutionary response, right? It helps us
Mm.
survive and protects us from real dangers. Like in caveman times, it was against predators and saber-toothed tigers and things like that, right? Many of our modern day stressors, like text or an email from a boss, or
Mm.
getting to Sunday and just feeling really anxious just over the idea of work, right, aren't life threatening, right? They're not
Yeah.
existential, but our bodies still react as if they are, and
Mm.
that's problematic. So yeah, the good news is we can retrain our minds and our bodies to distinguish between what's a real threat and what's not, and to respond in healthier, more productive ways to everyday stressors. And this retraining is a core part of what I focus on with my clients, using a blend of coaching, psychotherapy, education, and breath work, to
Mm.
improve both well-being as well as performance, especially long-term performance.
So you combine all the different techniques to help your clients, right? So I'm just curious, is there any symptoms to look out for, and when they discover that they're in this anxious mode, right? Are there like, I don't know, is it quick fix is the right way to say it, where people can do to help them to overcome that in that moment?
So a couple of things come to mind as you say that. So I think one actually, when people are stressed or anxious, I don't think like I think maybe broadly they're like, oh yeah, like and my skin isn't so good, my skin is flaring up, I get sick now and then. But
Mm.
for things like gut health, for things like aching and like chronic pain, I think those things are a little bit harder for people to associate with the stress that they're experiencing, right? And there's actually a lot of research around how these things are connected, and sort of the physiology behind everything. But I think mentally, it's like it's not an immediate connection that people make, right? And so I think actually the first thing is just to notice and to consider, like, if I really listen to my body, right? I'm putting my body through a lot of stress. I'm putting my mind through a lot of stress. But like just giving yourself the opportunity to really listen to your body and see maybe these things are correlated, right? Maybe the more stressed I am, right, the more tension, like the more physical tension I feel, and the longer it takes to sort of break away or like ease that tension. Maybe I'm, going to the bathroom a lot more than I need to, and the first thing really is that noticing, right? I don't know. In terms of like quick hacks, I want to say there aren't any quick hacks. What I do, at least in response to like stress and anxiety, is I think the breath is really important. And
Right.
this is also why breath is used when, you know, if you're a person that has panic attacks or has had panic attacks in the past, this is among the first things that most therapists will tell you to sort of use, right? Just slowing down the breath, taking a pause and taking longer, slower, deeper breaths. That helps to calm down your parasympathetic nervous system. And then for me personally, actually, when I get stressed or I find myself getting worked up, I kind of just like stretch like this and open up my chest a little bit to give myself a bit more room and to open up, like to allow my lungs to open up. And again, that's related to breath, but I would say that's the first thing that I think about when I do sense that my heart rate's picking up and all of those cues that stress is kicking in and anxiety is kicking in and things like that.
Right. Right. So the symptoms or the identification of the stress would be through the body, and also the fix, I would say, is through the body as well.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. So when you combine your psychology training, your somatics, psychotherapy, breathwork into your coaching, right? What would clients come to expect in a coaching session?
So So my style of coaching is a little different. I draw on my training and experience both as a coach and psychologist and sort of yoga instructor as well, though it's like I don't want to go too deeply into that. I have a pretty integrative approach in my work with my clients, and I integrate in a few ways. So the first thing is I integrate coaching and psychotherapy, maybe starting with talking a little bit about coaching. So coaching, I think, is a really really powerful modality, really powerful approach. And in my mind, it helps you do two things, right? So the first thing is it helps you to raise awareness of yourself, right? Your challenge, and the issue and the role of yourself within that challenge, right? And so there's a lot of sort of insight building. There's a lot of raising self awareness. There's a lot of organization and clarity of thoughts that maybe previously were jumbled in your head, and that opens up. You're able to see a lot more possibilities. You're able to see like a way forward. And then the second part of coaching that I think is really powerful and I think really separates coaching from psychotherapy is how sort of future focused, action oriented, performance oriented it is, right? So if you are working with a good coach, right, by the end of the session, you should see a way forward and there should be very sort of tangible, actionable things that you can do to get to a place where you want to be, right? To get to a state where you want to be. And I think that's the combination of those things is really powerful, especially for people who are goal oriented and committed and type A, which I would say most people that come to coaching are, right? So where psychotherapy I think plays a big role is mostly in that insight building, right? Because in coaching you tend to stay more in either the present or the recent past. And as I mentioned, it's very future focused, right? So I think psychotherapy and all of the, whether it's like trauma based or trauma informed therapy or yeah, like you have these different modalities, right? You do tend to reach into the past a bit more, right? And really get at, okay, where did this core belief come from? Where did these like thinking patterns come from? And for some people, they do stem from childhood experiences. And I know sort of trauma is becoming this, like a bit of a buzzword. Blending in that psychotherapy just allows you to go there, untangle a little bit of maybe the roots of the issue, maybe the issue behind the issue, right? The core beliefs that were developed at an early age. And then coming back to the present, now we have these a richer set of insights that we can use to propel us forward. So that's one way that I integrate just coaching and psychotherapy for my clients. The second thing is I have a cognitive and a somatic focus. So I talked quite a bit earlier about mind body connection, and I think a lot of therapists, a lot of coaches do a really great job of like sort of unlocking the mind, right? And like really understanding like what are these, like limiting self beliefs, what are these unhealthy thinking patterns, and how do we shift those to more healthy ways of thinking that actually help us, right? And actually give us confidence and all of these things. In addition to all of those things that we explore together, or I explore with my clients, I also bring them into their bodies a bit more, right? So everything that I talked about in terms of listening to the body and really taking the cues and the signals that our body is telling us about, what it's not happy with, and why it might be responding to stress the way it is. We spend a lot of time also exploring like the effects of stress on the body, and also the body's influence on your stress response and anxiety and things like that. So there's that cognitive element as well as that somatic element that we explore in sessions together. And then the third thing that I integrate is education and therapy. And I don't know, sometimes maybe I get a bit technical. I mentioned earlier that I'm a bit geeky, but to me, I think actually understanding the underlying physiology, understanding what's happening in your body and why and how, I think that actually gives a lot more importance, or like once you understand all of that, I think the level of relevance and the level of importance and the level of motivation that I experience with my clients or I observe in my clients is just different. And so I do dedicate a little bit of every session, really just to help them understand like what is mind body connection, what is the role of your nervous system, what are ways that in addition to therapy you can also be, fixing or retraining your body from the bottom up. And yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. And yeah, I, I found it so far to be really powerful.
Right. It sounds great in terms of like how you link up the cognitive and the somatic practices to actually help them to really understand not just their brain, like how they think, but also the body because it affects the total being. You mentioned there are lots of issues behind the issues earlier on. I'm just wondering if you could speak to any kind of like commonality in terms of the issues that you see across your clients.
So the presenting issue for a lot of people, right? It might be work related, right? It might be like they're kind of unsettled at work, or they're having trouble managing people, and their personal life, it might be like reactivity, right? Like I'm really irritable at home.
Right.
I think that's sort of a big theme in terms of the issues that people come initially with. And I think typically the deeper we dig, and the more we explore, there are a set of like pretty fundamental, very like human issues, right? Or core beliefs that we come to. And a lot of the time it's related to, some sort of insecurity or some sort of self belief that I'm not enough, right? Or I'm not seen, or
Mm,
um, I'm not important, right? I can't do it, right? It tends to come from that place, that sort of affects how they present at work and how they present at home, and how sensitive or how reactive they are to certain conversations or certain interactions they have with people. And I think once you get to that root, or once you get to that fundamental issue and bring a bit of clarity, like shine a light on it and see how, when that part of you is challenged, how your nervous system responds and how, your mind responds, it really helps you get some perspective on like really what is the issue that I'm dealing with, and where is it coming from, and how can I move forward from it.
right. And if we dig a bit deeper into like you saying listening to your body, the education of the physiology of the body, right? What are the practical actions or strategies that you guide your clients through to help them to overcome whatever issue that they're facing?
So the reason why I approach coaching and therapy from a holistic mind body perspective is because I strongly believe that without addressing your challenges as a whole person, like both your mind and your body, you're only like scratching the surface and dealing with symptoms. And two, when you acknowledge the connection between the mind and the body, it actually opens up a lot of avenues or potential strategies for healing and performance improvement, right? So therapy is not the only answer, right? And therapy isn't accessible to everyone. So I talked earlier about retraining the mind and the body to be able to identify what is a real threat and what's not a real threat. In today's world, a lot of us see like work emails and the possibility of feedback or criticism or deadlines as threats that activate the stress response. Even though again these stressors aren't actually existential or I would say for most people a threat to your survival, right? And the good news is this nervous system response, or this response in general, can be retrained both through the mind, through things like therapy, but also through the body, right? So, in addition to therapy and coaching, I mentioned breath work earlier. There are things like yoga and stretching that activate the vagus nerve. There's people talk about sort of walking in nature and that having a grounding presence. There's a lot of these practices if you do regularly do actually have a lot of psychological and physical improvements that come with it. And again, I think a lot of people think, or a lot of people may see things like breath work, things like walking in nature, arguably things like gratitude journaling and visualization as a bit like maybe woo woo or like, I
Mm,
don't know, maybe it activates the skeptic in them, right? But
right.
there is a lot of psychological, or there's a lot of science and research behind these practices to support the kind of improvements that you get if they're done regularly. And these techniques serve two purposes, right? A lot of them help to regulate your nervous system and put you in a more relaxed state during moments of stress or activation. And this essentially calms the body down and signals to your body and your mind that actually you're not in danger. Like you don't need to be like freaking out over an email, right? So your body slowly learns to identify that like, okay, this is not something that I need to get anxious over. And number two, and maybe this is related to that, but it really does train the mind and the body to start to differentiate and like develop new patterns for what is actually dangerous and what is safe. So that the next
Mm,
time you find yourself in, the same situation, the same interaction, the same exposed to the same kind of stimuli, right? You don't respond with the same level of sensitivity or reactivity as you did
mm,
in previous cases.
right. So I'm curious, right? You mentioned a lot of times about a real threat and a not a real accidental threat, like receiving an email from your boss. Is there a healthy response to that kind of stress? Because not responding is also not practical in a lot of ways. So I'm just curious, what would you say is a healthy response to a work email that is from your boss, like an issue?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, when you see, an urgent message or when you see, when you're making a presentation or when you are, all of these sort of work scenarios that do require you to step up a little bit, right? I do think that there is a role for sure for your sympathetic to take in, right? To be a little bit more focused, to be a little bit more like on guard and ready, right? I think where you need to be careful is sort of the frequency of this, as well as like
Mm,
how long the anxiety or the stress persists, right? So, for sure there are going to be cases where you need to address like an urgent work situation. You need to step up and make that presentation or whatever it is, right? But there are also these situations where I would say like especially earlier on in your career, like when I reflect on mine, right? When there were a lot of these interactions and there were a lot of these situations that really didn't require that level of focus, right?
mm,
And stress, right? So I mentioned earlier, like just getting to Sunday and thinking about the week, like that shouldn't stress you out, right? Or that shouldn't be something that causes you anxiety for half a day, right?
mm,
Which again, for me, it did, and I would argue for a lot of other people that experience the Sunday scaries, like it is a thing. So it really is thinking about like, okay, how frequently am I in this state, or like how what are the different things that like trigger this state, and like can I
Right.
cut that number down to like really allow my sympathetic only to be activated when it needs to be activated, and two, like think about how long you are in this state,
Right.
right? And whether once you realize actually the presentation is over, right? Or actually, like, on Sunday, I think about like a big meeting that's coming up and think, okay, you know what? But actually, it's okay. Like, that's something that I have time to deal with, right?
Mm.
And being able to sort of come down from that state into a place of at least psychological safety allows you to actually deal with the issue much better
Right.
and in a much more healthy way.
Yeah, I think the frequency and the length that you mentioned is really key, because if it's too often and too long, then it overwhelms your life and you can't function. So I think a certain level of healthy stress is okay, but if it overtakes everything, then there is an issue. So for those in the audience who might be interested in exploring coaching but feel a little hesitant, what would you say to them?
So coaching, as I mentioned earlier, tends to attract, I think, a very performance oriented type. And a lot of the time, the people that come for coaching are already, high achieving, already high functioning, and see things like stress, anxiety, and a sense of unease as almost normal, right? As like necessary, as like worth the cost of their success. And I find actually that the hesitation comes more from thinking like, like I don't think I need it, right? And I think to some extent that might be true, and for some people, true in general, right? But if you are experiencing stress and anxiety and unease, and if these are words that you relate to and experience, often, just imagine what you could be if that emotional weight were lifted and there was another better way. So think about how you would operate when you're not driven by, I have to prove myself, or I have to work from harder than everyone else, or I have to do things perfectly. Just how much more excited, inspired, creative, confident, optimistic you would be, and how all of these different things contribute to improved performance, but also just greater fulfillment. Yeah, I mean, without rambling, the quote that comes to mind is the price of doing the same old thing is far higher than the
Mm,
price of change.
right. Yeah, so shifting from stress, anxiety, and unease to being confident, creative, and inspired. I think that's what coaching is all about. Yeah. So you can connect with Amanda on CoachFellas. Amanda offers a free chemistry session to explore coaching with her. And if you want to continue her journey with her, she can also offer a 60 minutes one-to-one coaching session on CoachFellas. Amanda, thank you for being on Tribe Talks with Coach. Really, thank you and for sharing such wonderful insights about the mind and the body.
Thanks, Edwin.